Greetings, AP students. I just wanted to walk you through the template that you will be completing for your assignment. So what you're looking at right now is my simulated swipe data. So remember, the context was we have a keycard system and a number of IDs that correspond to unique employees. And every time an employee swipes their card when they're going into or out of the building, it registers one of these lines that has the employee ID followed by the time that the swipe occurred. And these times are stored in the number of seconds that have elapsed since midnight for that day. So all of this data just corresponds to one day. I've created this file, swipedata.csv, which starts with the number of entries, so there were 1,200 total swipes here, then the column names, ID and time, and then it's a chronological sequence of swipes. So these are all the swipes that happened during the day. All right, let's take a look at your template. So here inside your template package, you've got employee, employee records test, and simulator. We'll start with simulator. The simulator creates a new employee records object. This 300 is the number of unique employees that you are going to get the swipes of. My test data has 300. This sample swipe data has only, I think, 3 different employees. So then I've made a load data from file method already inside employee records, where you just give it the path to your data file, and as long as it's in the format that I described, it will read in the data. Then I also made a display all employees method. Although if you run it right now, you'll see it's not very helpful because you haven't actually written a toString method for your employee objects. But as soon as you do, then this will display all of your employee objects at the end. If we go to the very top, you'll see it says registering swipe for this employee at this time, over and over and over again. This is how load data from file is going to work. Let's look inside that method inside the employee records class. So here's employee records. It's already constructed with a list of employee objects. And that happens in the constructor here. You see it takes the number of IDs, and I create a whole bunch of empty employees with unique ID numbers. And that method is here. I've given you a getEmployeeById method. So that way you give it an ID number and it will look through the list and give you back an employee object that corresponds to that ID. It returns null if there is no ID for that employee object. This is the important one, register swipe. So register swipe is automatically called by my data loader for every single swipe. So for each line of that data file, I call it with an ID and whatever the time was. The first thing it does is it gets out whatever employee the ID was for, and then I just print out that line that you saw in my console. And it's up to you to decide what you want to have happen now. You could run some methods on your employee class, you could put more data inside employee records, it's sort of up to you. But the goal, remember, was to be able to answer these questions. What's the total time a particular person spent inside the building? What's the first time they swiped in? And so on. So you want to think about what fields you need to add to employee records and employee to make those questions easy to answer. I have written methods for each of those questions, and that's what you're responsible for in this assignment. So there's a getTimeInBuilding for this ID method. There's a getTimeInFor, that's the first time they swiped in for a particular ID. There's a getEmployee with most time, getEmployee with least time, and get a list of all the employees that were in the building at a particular time. The kind of extra credit assignment was give me the time interval for which there were the most employees in the building. Ooh, this should probably be long. Okay, sorry. Extra credit, you'll need to change this to long. I've given you some helper methods here. You can give it a number of seconds and it'll convert that to hours and vice versa. And then here's my load data method, and you see here in the heart of load data, every time, so we're looping through the file here, we get each line, we split it on commas, I parse the 2 numbers as the ID and the time, and then I run register swipe for that ID and time. Employee records test is a bunch of JUnit tests that test your various methods. So setup before class is a method that runs at the very beginning before you run any of the tests. So here I create a new records object. I load data from my sample swipe data file, which you can see here. And I display all the records so that you as a human being can read and see what makes sense. And then I get the first swipe time for employees 0, 1, and 2, and I get the total amount of time in the building for employees 0, 1, and 2, and so forth. And these are my pre-computed answers to each of these. So when you run this JUnit test on your final solution, it should tell you whether or not it actually works. Okay, good luck. Happy coding.